Greetings, Minecrafters, and welcome to another Minecraft discussion here today. My name is Kimberly Quinn, and I just have to tell you, I'm just thrilled to be here. And it was just pounding, like 20-pound drops outside. It was so crazy, and I had to just be in that and listen to it and experience it. And I love it when it pounds. Honestly, I think it's even cooler at night because like we can sleep. But it's still pretty neat. And it's also really neat when it comes over like the ocean, if you have that good fortune. It's just like, it's fast. It's like, you know, and it's over. Anyway, okay. Had to wait for that to stop so you could hear. It makes lots of noise on the video. So anyway, today I would like to have a chat with you and ask you, you know, ooh, there's still some rumblies out there. Anyway, are you surviving, just surviving, or thriving? This is super important, and it's also important to do a little disclaimer because there are times in life when we're surviving because we've got some huge life curveball, you know, that just happened to us, like a death in the family. I just went to a wake this weekend for wonderful, wonderful friends of ours who had a horrible loss, and so there are times when we're just surviving and getting through. For sure. And but thank goodness, most of the time that's not it, right? Thankfully. And most of the time, life isn't even an urgency, forget emergency. So when we find ourselves, you know, just surviving over the daily stuff, like the petty stuff, and then not to say it's not hard, dealing with petty stuff at work and snark and you know, paying bills and all that stress that can come with that, and you know, be parenting of little kids, even though you love it and it's fun, and you know, keeping track of all the appointments and trying to change up the dinner routines so everybody's happy about it, and the household chores, blah 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 blah. Though even with all that stuff said, we talked about it, you know, in a bunch of episodes, that life isn't an emergency. It's not even usually an urgency. And here's the thing, is if we use up all of our energy, you know, for day-to-day stuff, not saying it's not annoying and frustrating, but if we use up, like, you know, if we're at DEFCON 4, when it's just, you know, getting to a pediatrician appointment or something, then that can be exhausting and use up the juice, like use up the fuel in the tank, and then we don't have it as much when we really need it when something happens. So that's part of it. But the next part is like, what are you doing to feed your spirit? So in addition to being in the moment, realizing life is not an emergency usually, not even usually an urgency, what are you doing to feed your spirit? Especially in this summertime, when I'm thinking gardens and growth and, you know, plush. We've got Zora the zucchini out there, actually. She's got lovely zucchinis popping out all over. And you say you named your zucchini. Yes, well, yes, I did. Her name is Zora. She's in this huge, big pot. I think she might be feeling a little cramped, which I didn't realize till now, but she's doing pretty well. So, but this time where we're surrounded by lushness and plushness and things growing and richness, and, you know, think about that, like emotional fertilizer. What emotional fertilizer are you dumping on your head to keep yourself filled up? Because that is our number one job. Because it's not you, for the most part, I'm not talking about those isolated, big, huge life events. It's not about just surviving. It's about thriving and grabbing the world by the ass. Like it's just one big playground. You know, the world is our oyster as much as we can. And so it's important to realize that it's super important to do what makes our heart sing, even if it's 5 minutes a day or 10 minutes a day. Just when you get up in the gratitude journal and maybe read something uplifting, watch an uplifting quick YouTube, take a few minutes to be mindful, go for a walk. If another little trick there is to set the alarm, you know, preferably a half an hour earlier than you actually need to get up. Because if we set ourselves up to be hurried, where we're just making it and hitting the snooze button, we're not setting ourselves up to thrive. We're setting ourselves up to be in survive mode, not thrive mode. It's like, oh my gosh, now we start out behind and I want one more cup of coffee, and then the dog has to go out, and so then we're setting ourselves up to just survive our day versus thrive our day, right? So that's a really good tip, actually, that half an hour earlier. Even 15 minutes, anything is better than just tapping that snooze button and just barely making it. take a little bit longer shower, just sit. I do that so much on the deck out there. Sometimes I just stare into the trees and I watch the birds flying around and try to figure out who's making what noise and things like that. And then of course, physically, if you feel like you don't have the time to do any kind of workout, besides, it's got to be something you got to like to do. But again, the summer, this is kind of what I'm saying is this is the easiest time of the year for most people, whether you're rural or urban or suburban or whatever. The summer is pretty much the easiest time to get it going on because of the weather, the food, the fruits and vegetables are all in season to make food changes. If you're those of us who live in the north, you're not shoveling, which takes extra time in the morning or the evening. So this is really the time to make these changes. And it's interesting because there's such an emphasis on, new ways to feed our spirit and get it all together when it's the first of the year, New Year's, right? New Year's Eve, New Year's resolutions. And it's dark and cold, and that's not making a lot of sense to me. It should really be, it really makes more sense for it to be June, July, August, September. In fact, the Jewish New Year, I think, lands on the exact right spot because in September, most places, at least in the States, September in most places is just gorgeous. Dry and beautiful. It's a little bit hotter, obviously, as you go down south, but in Vermont, it's absolutely perfection. Not a word I like to use, but it fits in this particular instance. Okay, and then sleeping, another thing that works to keep ourselves filled up, because again, the rain sounds, you can crank the windows open, have a little bit of a heat wave going, but the air conditioning, that white noise, can also work for sleeping better. And we don't realize some of these things, they do keep us filled up because sleep deprivation, actually, I'm talking about chronically, not like you missed a night, you have a newborn. Chronic sleep deprivation can lead to depression. It also leads to weight gain because the hormones leptin and ghrelin are out of whack, and those are the hunger hormones that help us to feel hungry, and then the other one helps us to feel satisfied, and they get our metabolism all screwed up. We can obviously, there goes our immune system, so we touch a doorknob, say catch the Rona, but just catch anything, catch a virus. Whereas if you're up and drinking your OJ and all that, getting good sleep most of the time, you can touch that doorknob or somebody's cell phone, and your body fights it off like with their little macrophages like Marines, and then you go home without it, right? And also, sleep deprivation mimics the signs of aging also. We are less creative, less productive, less happy. So we're talking about keeping ourselves filled up. The sleeping thing is huge. We're talking about most of the time because when we don't get it chronically, basically we get sick, fat, crabby, irritable, we're uncreative, unproductive, and we look old. So there you go. So keep yourself filled up that way. Again, and I love a good burger. I'm not saying I'm far from a vegan. My rooftop friend is a vegan, my best friend from growing up, and God bless her. I've never seen anybody eat more healthfully in my life. I eat very healthfully, but I'm not above a good burger. I also like a steak. Don't have much of a sweet tooth, but I like the nachos and the things sometimes. We're talking about, healthy, making your heart sing, hanging out with friends, relationships, even if it's this long, or if you're on the phone. If you can't be in person, you're on the phone. But because all this stuff keeps us filled up. And the thing is, and it's bringing me back to young motherhood, when we get in this mode of surviving rather than thriving, I'm talking again under regular circumstances, not under some catastrophic something in your family. Regular circumstances, we can get into the mode of putting ourselves last on the list and not keeping ourselves filled up. And that's a little heavier to lift to get out of it. And I remember being a young mom and being in that because we're conditioned and socialized or however condition works, and taught as little girls and young women, even though we don't, necessarily, we're not conscious of it, to put yourselves last. And obviously our children's basic needs, obviously, that's in the contract that your kids are first. Yet it's also important to, even if it's just an hour a week, or preferably break that up over some days, 15 minutes a day, and then maybe you get to skedaddle off with the women friends for a Christmas shopping weekend like we used to do. It's not a lot of time, but wow, do you need it? Because then you come back being a better partner, better mother, better sister, better daughter, better employee, everything. So it's the number one job to keep ourselves filled up. We talked about that before. Surviving versus thriving. It's not about just getting by. And then lastly, not lastly, it's actually firstly, but all this wraps up into the authentic path and living our highest vibe self. That is the whole point. Our whole point of us being here is to learn how to love ourselves and each other, which we can't do very well if we're exhausted and hungry and spiritually, emotionally, physically depleted from being everybody's everything all the time without refilling the tank. So in order to live at our highest vibe self, to be the best, your most unique self, where you've got all this to give to the world, you've got to have it to be able to give it, okay? Keep yourselves filled up rather than just merely survive, thrive. This is Kimberly Quinn signing off from the beautiful, very wet Northern Vermont. Have a mindful day.